those people whose income has gone up dramatically over the past 10 or 20 years, we don't ask them to pay anything.
This House Budget Committee hearing, the markup is likely to continue all day coverage at cspan.org, and we'll also have it within the hour at on C-SPAN 3 television as well. The U.S. House gaveling in for an afternoon working on a bill that would repeal part of the 2010 health care law. Live House coverage on C-SPAN.
Oh God, we confess our hope for the future is challenged by present circumstances. As we read or watch the news, our faith often falters. Thank you, God, for examples of steadfastness and belief in the future. We thank you for people who plant trees though they may not live to enjoy them. We thank you for public servants and grassroots folk who struggle to preserve our society so that our children and grandchildren may inherit an inhabitable world. We know, O God, that all people who believe and hope for the future are not necessarily doing it in your name, but we acknowledge them as yours, and we pray that you help us, each of us, to join their ranks, restore our faith, remind us that you are our hope, for the sake of him who died young, so that we all might have a future, we pray. Amen.
Amen. The Chair has examined the Journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House her approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the Journal stands approved. What purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, I demand a vote on the Speaker's approval of the Journal.
Questions on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the Journal. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The Journal stand approved.
And, Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. The point of order is withdrawn. Pledge of Allegiance will be led today by the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Slaughter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would like everyone in the chamber to join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will now entertain up to 15 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
House for 1 minute.
And the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, great communities are made up of wonderful people, and Atlanta is a great community. And Monica Kaufman has been an integral champion in making Atlanta a great community. For nearly 40 years, she's been an anchor on WSB-TV in Atlanta, and now, sadly, she's retiring. From her warm smile to her anxiously anticipated hairstyle, to her passion and her warmth for our beloved Metro Atlanta, we all love Monica Kaufman. What a great champion of goodwill, Southern charm, and spirit she has been. And for all the wonderful work she's given to our region and our state and our nation, Monica, we love you and we wish you Godspeed in your future activities and your future happiness. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from California rise? Does the gentlelady seek unanimous consent? The gentlelady is recognized.
A year ago, on April 3rd, on a Marine base in Afghanistan, Harry Liu was the victim of hazing. He was punched and kicked by his peers as they poured the contents of a sandbag over his face and mouth. This physical torture and hazing lasted a full 3 hours and 20 minutes. 22 minutes after his abuser stopped, Harry killed himself. He was my nephew. The perpetrators were let off with virtually no punishment. That is why, for months after his death, I have been calling for congressional hearings to look into the prevalence of hazing in the military. The military must implement a zero-tolerance policy and must change the culture of hazing that is not only accepted but encouraged. And tomorrow, almost on the anniversary of his needless and avoidable death, Congress will act. I urge all of you to watch online the Armed Services Committee hearing on hazing in the military. We can and we must hold the military accountable so no one will ever again have to go through what Harry endured.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Madam Speaker, request permission or unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, the Gulf Coast is known for its whip-whirling tropical storms, devastating hurricanes, wildfires, and floods. And whenever such storms hit, C-130 aircraft sweep in from Fort Worth, Texas at a moment's notice. They bring life-saving supplies and cargo to rescue civilians. The C-130s have carried out 423 Gulf storm response missions, evacuated 300 storm victims, and transported over 900 tons of emergency supplies to the Gulf region alone. But, Madam Speaker, for some reason, the Air Force wants to remove the C-130s from Texas and send them to Montana. Madam Speaker, when's the last time you heard of a hurricane in Montana? The expensive, unwise transfer of the C-130s would cost taxpayers $100 million. The C-130s have come to the rescue in hurricanes Katrina, Rita, Ike, and Gustav. When I served in a C-130 unit at Houston's Ellington Field in the 70s, I came to know how efficient these aircraft are. That's why they are nicknamed the Hercules. Keep these life-saving planes in the Gulf where they are needed. Don't send them to Montana. And that's just the way it is. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island seek recognition? Gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise to commemorate the 51st anniversary of the United States Peace Corps. Since its founding in 1961, the Peace Corps has sent 200,000 American men and women to serve in 139 countries. Among the 9,000 serving around the world today are residents of Rhode Island's 1st Congressional District: Sarah Chase, Jenna DeSt. Jury, Andrew Egan, Frank Hoder, Daniel Malin, Peter Pagonis, and Daniel Restivo. Peace Corps volunteers create new opportunities, expand development, and encourage progress around the world. Year after year, these selfless men and women immerse themselves in the day-to-day life of a developing nation, connect with local residents, and work with them to share information. With the implementation of new policies this year for the Peace Corps Response Program, even more volunteers will be eligible to help those most in need. I applaud the Peace Corps for its accomplishments, offer my thanks to the dedicated volunteers that make it so successful, and thank them for the difference they're making in the world. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House 1 minute revising and extend my remarks.
Gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, during the President's effort to lobby for the government takeover of health care, he promised the American people his proposal would cost $940 billion and, quote, won't add a dime to the deficit and is paid for up front. The Washington Examiner editorialized last week, the President, quote, knew the funny numbers his administration were putting out, end of quote, but delivered a speech with blunders anyway. Last week, the Congressional Budget Office released a report stating that the Obamacare will cost $1.76 trillion, a figure almost double the initial price tag that he promised. Based on these reports, it is clear that the false claims are being exposed. House Republicans have already voted to repeal the unconstitutional government takeover of health care, which the NFIB has said will destroy 1.6 million jobs. The Senate now needs to vote. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and we will never forget September 11th and the global war on terrorism.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Texas seek recognition? Gentlelady is recognized.
Madam Speaker, for decades, women in this country have unfairly borne the burden of excessive health care costs. Fortunately, through the Affordable Care Act, millions of women no longer have to worry about going bankrupt if they get sick. The Affordable Care Act ensures that being a woman will no longer be treated as a pre-existing condition. The Affordable Care Act bans insurance companies from requiring women to obtain a referral for access to necessary OB/GYN care, and bans insurance companies from dropping women when they get sick or pregnant. Despite these accomplishments in women's health, the war on women continues in Texas. The Governor Perry's political decision to forego nearly $40 million in federal funding for the Texas Medicaid Women's Health Care Program will leave 130,000 women without access to preventive health services. Despite these obstacles, I will continue to fight for the increased access to quality health care for women in Texas. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Hampshire rise?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
And the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today, the Congress will take up the HB 5, Protecting Access to Health Care Act. Amongst other things, this bill will repeal the Independent Payment Advisory Board, one of the many ill-conceived provisions that were part of the so-called Affordable Health Care Act. This Independent Advisory Board basically is charged 15 unelected individuals with making decisions about what's covered for both patients and below the age of 65 and Medicare recipients. It is the Affordable Health Care Act's way of reducing costs, i.e. telling doctors and patients what they can do and what they can't do. 15 unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. are going to tell you what you can do. They stand ahead of you and your doctor. Now, this bill did not make it to the floor last year. It will make it to the floor this year with bipartisan support. It costs $3.1 billion, which is made up with a tort law reform provision which has been added. But that shows that $3.1 billion is what's saved by denying Americans access to health care that they've purchased or that they deserve. Join me in repealing the Independent Payment Advisory Board.
For what purpose does the Minority Leader rise? The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I thank the gentlewoman from New York for yielding time. I'm proud to stand with her and with other Democratic members in support of the women's access to comprehensive, affordable health care. Access that was greatly expanded by the Affordable Care Act, which passed 2 years ago this week, and which my Republican colleagues want to repeal. Thanks to health care reform, over 13 million previously uninsured women will gain access to health insurance. Thanks to health reform, insurance companies will no longer be allowed to discriminate against women by charging them higher premiums than men for the same exact policy, or by denying them coverage altogether simply because they are women. Thanks to health care reform, millions of women with private insurance will no longer have to pay for preventive services like mammograms, cervical cancer screening, contraception, and a host of other services. As a dad of 3 daughters, as a grandfather of 2 granddaughters, and as a great-grandfather of 1 great-granddaughter, I am glad we did that. And thanks to the Affordable Care Act, preventive services are already free for Medicare beneficiaries. If I had the time, I'd say the other benefits of this bill that we ought to keep, and I will not join my friend from New Hampshire in trying to repeal a provision of this act.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia rise?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
And the gentleman is recognized.
I rise today to give a tribute to a friend, a television broadcast icon, the talented and eloquent Monica Kaufman Pearson. In 1975, Monica became the first African-American, and in fact, the first female to anchor a daily evening newscast in Atlanta. Years later, it was revealed that she beat out Jane Pauley and Oprah Winfrey for the coveted position. And just like these high-profile women, Monica has risen to achieve extraordinary success. For her diligent reporting and superb storytelling, she has won 30 Emmy Awards and numerous honors. However, Monica does not simply report the evening news. I can confidently say that she is one of Georgia's finest. Throughout the years, she has lent her voice and efforts to charitable causes within her community, living out her motto, "It's what you do with what you have that makes you what you are." On behalf of the United States Congress, it is my privilege to honor America's and Atlanta's top news leader, Monica Kaufman Pearson, for her outstanding career and significant contributions to broadcast journalism. We love you, Monica. We'll miss you. And God bless you. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition? Gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to support the provisions in the Affordable Care Act that close the gender gap in health care. Beginning in 2014, health insurers cannot charge women more just because of their gender. Health insurers cannot deny coverage because of pre-existing conditions like having survived cancer, or having been pregnant, or having been a victim of domestic violence, a condition that is almost as disproportionately experienced by women as pregnancy. And health plans will have to cover preventative services like mammograms, screening for cervical cancer, and yes, contraception. Republicans in Congress are trying to block these and other reforms so that health insurers or employers or members of Congress can make women's health and reproductive decisions rather than trust those decisions to women. Madam Speaker, women can make those decisions. They really don't need help from insurers or employers or politicians or radio talk show hosts. Women want to make those important personal decisions for themselves, and they should. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
I ask consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise to speak in strong support of H.R. 5, the PATH Act, which will fix 2 of the worst problems with Obamacare. It repeals the Independent Payment Advisory Board, a group of 15 bureaucrats who will ration health care for seniors on Medicare. And H.R. 5 enacts medical liability reform. Each year, 1/4 of America's doctors are hit with lawsuits. 90% of them are later found innocent. These frivolous lawsuits drive up costs and limit patients' time with their doctors. In 2003, my home state of Texas enacted liability reforms bringing more than 14,000 new physicians to the Lone Star State. Many of these doctors moved to rural areas, filling a critical gap in care. Madam Speaker, these reforms have lowered costs and increased access to care in Texas, and will do the same for America. I urge my colleagues to listen to the American people and support H.R. 5. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Connecticut rise? Does the gentlelady seek unanimous consent? Gentlelady is recognized with unanimous consent.
Madam Speaker, among the many beneficial reforms for women in the Affordable Care Act passed 2 years ago this week is an end to the discriminatory practice of gender rating, in which individual women are charged more than men for the same coverage. We know for a fact that these sorts of discriminatory policies are not something that insurers would just change on their own. According to a report that the National Women's Law Center released earlier this week, over 90% of the best-selling plans in states that have not already banned gender rating still charge women more than men for the very same coverage. This costs women and their families approximately $1 billion a year. Because we fought, and we fought hard 2 years ago, gender rating will be a thing of the past in 2014. At long last, a woman's health will be put on equal footing with that of her spouse, her son, or her brother. This is just one of the many benefits for women in the Affordable Care Act. I could not be more proud to have helped pass this piece of legislation which will transform women's health in this country. Yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentleman's recognized.
Madam Speaker, I would like to join with my other Georgia colleagues today and congratulate Monica Kaufman Pearson on a distinguished career. Ms. Pearson, known most of us that's been watching it for a long time as Monica Kaufman, is retiring after more than 30 years as a night beat anchor for WSB-TV and Channel 2 News in Atlanta. I, along with many Georgians, have welcomed Ms. Pearson into my home every night while watching the news. Although her retirement is well-deserved, she will be missed by us all. After graduating from the University of Louisville, Ms. Pearson began her career as reporter for the Louisville Times. Later, she took part in a summer program for minority groups at the Columbia School of Journalism, graduate school at the University of New York. Before coming to Atlanta, Ms. Pearson worked in the public relations field and as an anchor for WHAS-TV in Louisville. Even with her retirement, I know she will continue to be a role model for the citizens of Georgia and continue using her helping hands to raise money for charity and local community organizations. I wish Ms. Pearson the best in her future endeavors, and Monica, the Nightbeat News will not be the same without you. Thank you very much. Now yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from New York seek recognition? Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. There, that's more my size. 2 years ago, I was really honored to serve as the chair of the House Committee on Rules and bring this historic Affordable Care Act to the House floor. It was one of my proudest moments. And I stand here today equally proud to defend that law from the ongoing war on women. When it comes to health care, women are classified as a pre-existing condition. For decades, women have been routinely charged more for health insurance than a man who seeks the very same coverage. Did you know that if a business employs more women than men, it can choose to raise everybody's premiums, regardless of gender, to cover the highest cost, which is in their mind, of insuring women? Women not only pay the standard insurance coverage, but they also pay a separate cost for maternity coverage. In Illinois, a 30-year-old woman must pay $278 a month and an additional $270 a month for maternity coverage in case she needs it. Insurance companies claim that these added costs are because women are more likely to visit doctors, get checkups, take prescription drugs, and have illnesses. Everyone knows that preventive care, everyone but the insurance companies apparently, saves us money in the long run, and we women, the majority in the United States, are tired of being second-class citizens. Yield back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana rise?
Address the House for 1 minute to revise and summary.
Does the gentleman seek unanimous consent?
I do.
The gentleman is recognized.
I'm a doctor, and as a doctor who still treats patients, I understand how important it is to have health care for the millions of Americans who depend upon it, particularly Medicare. Therefore, I fully support the repeal of the Independent Payment Advisory Board, a new government bureaucracy of 15 unelected, unaccountable officials created by the President's health care law. Now, as it turns out, the IPAB can only save money by slashing payments to physicians, to Medicare Advantage programs and prescription drug plans, things that our seniors depend upon daily. I cannot imagine why my Democratic colleagues support making it more difficult for a senior to obtain the care that she needs and deserves. The faith that centralized planning of the IPAB will be successful in controlling costs brings to mind Samuel Johnson's quote regarding second marriages. It is the triumph of hope over experience. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Delaware seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to remember the Reverend Maurice Moyer, who died Tuesday, March 6th at age 93. Reverend Moyer was one of Delaware's most respected and beloved citizens and a prominent civil rights leader. As president of the Wilmington branch of the NAACP from 1960 to 1964, Reverend Moyer led the fight for open public accommodations and fair housing. He was part of the 1963 March on Washington and participated in the Voting Rights March from Selma to Montgomery in 1965. Reverend Moyer fought tirelessly for equal rights for all and was an inspiration for everyone who knew him. He did so much to make Delaware and our country a better place for all of us. It was a privilege for me to know him personally and to join his family and friends for his 90th birthday party, where we celebrated his incredible life and legacy. I will always remember Reverend Moyer's broad smile, his strong voice, and his kind heart. My thoughts and prayers go out to his family and friends. Thank you. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I rise today to express my concern with the Independent Payment Advisory Board. This unelected bureaucracy is another example of the extreme flaws in the massive health care overhaul. The power that would be wielded by the IPAB is unprecedented. More troubling, it diminishes the oversight of the ability of Congress, a fundamental element of our nation's system of checks and balances. Many doctors and care providers in my home state of Florida are already unable to accommodate the new Medicare beneficiaries, and the IPAB will create further uncertainty and could certainly harm seniors' ability to access care. Madam Speaker, this health care bill is not working. We hear about major problems from every facet of the health care system, both patients and providers. Repealing the IPAB is an important step in rolling back this deeply flawed and unpopular health care bill. I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Nevada rise?
Mr. House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks today.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I feel as if it's deja vu all over again. Just 1 year ago, Washington Republicans proposed a plan to kill Medicare by turning it over to private insurance companies. Passed the House. Luckily, it failed in the Senate. Now, just 1 year later, Republicans are pushing yet another plan to kill Medicare and devastate Nevada seniors by forcing them to pay thousands more out of their own pockets for health care. Mr. Speaker, it was a bad idea for Nevada seniors when it was first proposed. It's a bad idea for Nevada seniors now. Unfortunately, these are the kinds of priorities we have come to expect from Washington Republicans. Instead of strengthening Medicare, Washington Republicans have spent this year trying to undermine it in order to pay for massive taxpayer giveaways to big oil companies making billions of profits and tax breaks for corporations who are shipping our jobs overseas. It's a matter of getting our priorities straight, and the Republicans in Washington just don't get it. We need to put Nevada seniors first, not big oil executives, not Washington's Wall Street billionaires. We must focus on creating jobs and not killing Medicare by turning it over to greedy insurance companies. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana rise?
To address the House for 1 minute.
Does the gentleman seek unanimous consent?
Yes.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in strong support of H.R. 5, the bill that we're bringing to the floor today to repeal the Independent Payment Advisory Board, this group of 15 unelected bureaucrats here in Washington, D.C. that under the President's health care law would be able to ration care for our nation's seniors. I think most hard-working American families out there would much rather the decisions between a patient and a doctor to be made on health care, not some unelected bureaucrats to be allowed to ration our grandmother's care. And so that's why we're repealing this law. Hopefully it's going to send it over to the Senate, and we'll finally be able to get some good bipartisan support over there. And as part of this reform, we're also not just repealing, we're replacing with real common sense medical liability reform. And this is something that should have been in the President's law, but of course his law wasn't about reform, it was about a government takeover. We are actually putting in place legislation that would put common sense medical liability reform in place. According to the Harvard School of Public Health, 40% of medical malpractice suits filed in the United States are, quote, without merit. But what does that do? That dramatically increases the cost of health care, because so many doctors out there will tell you that many of the tests they run on us are not because of our health, to look at health outcomes. It's to avoid frivolous lawsuits. We finally address that, lowering the cost and improving quality of care. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Permission to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman's recognized.
Over the past several months, we have seen Republicans wage war on women's health. Nowhere can the Republican zeal for limiting women's access to affordable, quality health care be seen more clearly than in their attempt to dismantle the Affordable Care Act. Improving health care has long been a priority for women, reflecting their experiences as patients, mothers, and caregivers. For decades, insurance companies have been able to deny coverage and charge higher rates for women simply because of their gender. Thanks to the Affordable Care Act, the greatest advancement for women's health in a generation, this will no longer be legal. This law moves us closer to the day when essential women's health services are covered, prevention is a priority, care is coordinated. On the eve of the 2-year anniversary of the Affordable Care Act, I join my colleagues in protecting health care reform for women, and I rebuke all attempts to continue discriminatory health insurance policies that result in women paying more than men. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 5, the health efficient, accessible, low-cost, timely health care Act of 2011, which also contains H.R. 452, the Medicare Decisions Accountability Act of 2011. I'm a co-sponsor of both these very important pieces of legislation. The Independent Payment Advisory Board, IPAB, must be repealed, as this board will have extremely negative consequences on American families' health care. This board of unelected members will be making decisions for tens of thousands of Medicare patients. The power to control the purse strings will give enormous power to control what type of care a patient receives. I strongly believe that physicians and patients are in the best position to decide their own health care, and the IPAB must be repealed. In addition, the Health Act is absolutely needed. I've been working on medical malpractice issues since my time in the Ohio General Assembly when we passed successful tort reform. The current system is broken and places a $210 billion burden on our nation's health system each year. H.R. 5 will bring savings for patients and doctors. It is an important step in helping our Medicare's liability system make sure that it works in this country. I support both bills, and I yield back my time.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition? Does the gentlelady seek unanimous consent? So recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise to recognize the ways that young people in my congressional district and around the country are benefiting from the Affordable Care Act. Before health reform, young adults were the age group most likely to be uninsured, losing their coverage right after they left home and entered the workforce. But thanks to the health reform law, 2.5 million young people, including nearly 10,000 in my communities, now have health insurance. And some of them have reached out to tell us how the law is working for them and for their families. Jamie from Santa Barbara wrote, "I got back on my parents' insurance and was finally able to visit the dentist and get a new prescription for eyeglasses that I desperately needed." Maria from Oxnard says, "As a recent graduate, I felt completely vulnerable. With health care reform, I'm now able to stay with my parents' health insurance, which has given me peace of mind while I search for employment." Madam Speaker, health reform is working for young people on California's Central Coast. We must ensure the law stays strong to keep them and their families healthy, and I'll say the same for this entire nation. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from the Northern Mariana Islands seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. 40 years ago, Dr. Tan Siu Lin founded what is known as Tan Holdings, the largest private employer in the Northern Mariana Islands. Over 4 decades, Dr. Tan, together with his wife and their children, nurtured their small homegrown business into an international powerhouse. Tan Holdings has become one of the region's most important tourism businesses, with hotels, booking agencies, and soon an airline, Saipan Air. The company also provides personal and corporate insurance, distributes some of the world's best-known consumer goods in our islands, is active in real estate, and publishes a newspaper. In addition to these business accomplishments, Tan Holdings has established the Tan Siu Lin Foundation, which has donated millions of dollars to deserving causes and activities in our islands, setting an example of social responsibility. Please join me in congratulating Tan Holdings for his 40 years, helping to build the economy of the Northern Mariana Islands and economies throughout Micronesia. And I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Maine seek recognition?
Address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in the 2 years since its enactment, the Affordable Care Act has truly improved health care for families in Maine. It has given 190,000 seniors access to free preventative care and saved them over $5 million in prescription drug costs. It has allowed 7,000 young adults to stay on their parents' insurance. And in Maine, it has helped 1,300 small businesses provide their employees with health coverage. More critical benefits are on the way, including banning insurance companies from charging women more, simply because of their gender. Yet here we are again, debating how to undo these successes, debating how to block women's access to contraceptive. And this week, considering proposals to dismantle Medicare and shift the cost back to seniors. This must stop. We can't afford to go back to the status quo, denying women equal access to care, or telling seniors they're on their own, or letting families go bankrupt just because someone got sick. We must let the Affordable Care Act stand so more Americans have the chance to reap the benefits of true health care reform. Thank you. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Hawaii rise? Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's been about 236 years since we declared independence, but it's only been 92 years since women could vote. We have fought for equality, fighting our way from being second-class citizens. One such battle is the discrimination in health care. For so long, insurance companies have denied coverage for pre-existing conditions like pregnancy, breast cancer, C-sections, and domestic abuse. 90% of the best-selling plans charge women more. Some plans require women to even get a pre-authorization before they can seek OBGYN services. From 2014, that will not be the case because of the Affordable Care Act. But just a few months ago, efforts by Republicans were to block contraception. Now the attempts are to repeal the Affordable Care Act. This is the act that's been the great equalizer for women and children. Don't let them turn the clock back. We should not have to do another 100 years to battle for equality. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my
Gentleman is
remarks.
recognized.
Madam Speaker, today in Sudan, tens of thousands of men, women, and children are huddled in caves in the Nuba Mountains of South Kordofan and in Blue Nile State, where they're hiding from aerial bombardment and rocket attacks unleashed by the Sudanese government in Khartoum. They have nothing to eat because they've not been able to plant crops this year. And although the world stands ready to provide life-saving assistance, that same government in Khartoum refuses to allow them access to it. When the rainy season descends on Sudan in the coming weeks, it will be too late to get food in, and these people will face starvation. Madam Speaker, for decades, this Congress and successive U.S. administrations have expressed the will of the American people that we will not allow so many innocent people to die in a struggle for land and power. I ask my colleagues to condemn the Sudanese government's assault on innocent people and denounce President Omar al-Bashir's decision to use food as a weapon of war. We have little economic or political interest in this situation, but we do have a profound moral obligation to speak out. Khartoum must withdraw its armed forces, stop attacking civilians, and allow humanitarian access immediately. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent on the Committee on House Administration be discharged from further consideration of House Concurrent Resolution 108 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
Without objection. The clerk will report the title of the concurrent resolution.
House Concurrent Resolution 108, concurrent resolution permitting the use of the rotunda of the Capitol for a ceremony as part of the commemoration of the days of remembrance of victims of the Holocaust.
Is there objection to the consideration of the concurrent resolution? Without objection, the current resolution is agreed to and the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Without objection. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on the motion to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, or on which the vote incurs objection under Clause 6 of Rule 20. Any recorded vote on the postponed question will be taken later today. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and concur in Senate amendments to Bill H.R. 886.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 886, an act to require the Secretary of the Treasury to mint coins in commemoration of the 225th anniversary of the establishment of the nation's first federal law enforcement agency, the United States Marshals Service. Senate amendment.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Stivers, and the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Miller, each will control 20 minutes, and the Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to add extraneous material to the bill.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
And the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to urge the House to concur in 2 minor amendments made by the Senate to H.R. 886, introduced by the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Womack, and passed by the House last December with more than 300 co-sponsors. The amendments, which are unobjectionable, merely certify that the coins produced under the program outlined in the bill will comply with existing law requiring that they be produced at no cost to the taxpayers. Madam Speaker, the 112 Congresses ago, during the first session of the first Congress, George Washington signed into law the Judiciary Act and appointed the first 13 men who formed the basis for the nation's first federal law enforcement agency. The Marshal Service will celebrate its 125th anniversary in 3 years. This legislation authorizes issuance of coins recognizing that anniversary. Surcharges on the coin sales will generate funds for a number of law enforcement-related entities, primarily the U.S. Marshals Museum. I urge adoption of the bill as amended and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from North Carolina.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
And the gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The offices of the U.S. Marshals and Deputy Marshal were created by the first Congress in the Judiciary Act of 1789, the same legislation that established the federal judicial system. The Marshals were given extensive authority to support the federal courts within their judicial districts and to carry out all lawful orders issued by judges, by Congress, or by the President. Their first duty was to support the federal courts, and they served summons, subpoenas, writs, warrants, and other process issued by the courts, made any arrests necessary, and handled the prisoners. They dispersed the money. The marshals paid the fees and expenses of the court clerks, the U.S. attorneys, the jurors, the witnesses. They rented the courtrooms, the jail space, hired the bailiffs, the criers, what we'd probably now call a bailiff, the janitors, and on and on. They ensured that the courts functioned smoothly. They took care of the details so that the judges and the lawyers could concentrate on the cases before them. They made sure that the water pitchers were filled, the prisoners were present, the jurors were available, the witnesses were on time. But that was really only part of what the marshals did. When George Washington set up his first administration and Congress first convened, they both quickly discovered a gap in the constitutional design of our government. It had no provision for any administrative structure throughout the country. Both the Congress and the executive were housed in the nation's capital, and no agency was established or designed to represent the federal government anywhere else. The need for a national organization quickly became apparent. Congress and the President solved that in part by creating specialized agencies like Customs and Revenue collectors to levy taxes and tariffs. But there were still many other jobs of the federal government that needed to be done, and no one to do them. The only officers available to do it were the marshals and their deputies. So the marshals were pretty much the federal government throughout much of the country. They pretty much did everything. They took the national census every 10 years until 1870. They distributed presidential proclamations, collected a variety of statistical information on commerce and manufacturing. They supplied the names of government employees for the National Register, and they performed other routine tasks that were really necessary for the central government, the federal government, to function effectively. Over the past 200 years, Congress and the President has called on the marshals to do all manner of things, to carry out unusual and extraordinary missions like registering enemy aliens in time of war, capturing fugitive slaves from that lamentable period of our history, sealing the American border against armed expeditions aimed at foreign countries and swapping spies with the Soviet Union, and they remain a law enforcement agency. Within the last decade, the Marshals retrieved North Carolina's, my state's, copy of the Bill of Rights in a sting operation. The copy, North Carolina's copy, had been stolen by Sherman's men when Sherman's army came through Raleigh after they went through Atlanta and treated Raleigh with the same loving attention and care that they had shown Atlanta. We are proud now to have our copy back and thank the Marshals for having done it. Madam Speaker, I support this deserved honor for our Marshal service, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I recognize the yield time to the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Womack, as much time as he may consume.
Gentleman from Arkansas for as much time as he may consume.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for his time, and I thank the gentleman from North Carolina for his kind remarks, too. And I want to thank the Speaker of the House and Leader Cantor and Chairman Backus for giving me the honor and privilege of helping shepherd this important piece of legislation through the House. You know, as was already mentioned in previous remarks, this bill, 886, passed overwhelmingly through this House with, I think, only a single dissenting vote late last year in the first year of the 112th Congress, and it's gone over to the Senate and it's come back with an amendment that simply reassures the American people that none of the production costs, other costs associated with the minting of this coin that commemorates the 225th anniversary of the Marshal Service will be borne by the taxpayers. And so it just further assures the discerning public out here that the effort that we're doing today, while honoring a great law enforcement agency in the U.S. Marshal Service, but at the same time does not cost the taxpayers any money. So I urge strong support for this bill as amended, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from North Carolina.
Madam Speaker, we have no further speakers. I yield back my time as well.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have no further speakers. Did you yield back the balance of your time?
I did.
I would just urge adoption and yield back the balance of my time.
All time having been yielded back, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and concur in the Senate amendment to H.R. 886? Those in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say no. In the opinion of the chairs, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The Senate amendment is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
On that,
Gentleman from North Carolina.
On that, I demand a recorded vote.
The gentleman asks for the ayes and nays.
I do.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered, and pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek correct ignition?
Madam Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 591 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 119, House Resolution 591. Resolved that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill, H.R. 5, to improve patient access to health care services and provide improved medical care by reducing the excessive burden the liability system places on the health care delivery system. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and amendments specified in this resolution and shall not exceed 6 hours, equally divided among and controlled by the respective chairs and ranking minority members of the Committees on Energy and Commerce, the Judiciary, and Ways and Means. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. In lieu of the amendments recommended by the Committees on Energy and Commerce and the Judiciary now printed in the bill, an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of the Rules Committee Print 112-18 shall be considered as adopted in the House and in the Committee of the Whole. The bill as amended shall be considered as the original bill for the purpose of further amendment under the 5-minute rule and shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill as amended are waived. No further amendment to the bill as amended shall be in order except those printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. Each such further amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such further amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill as amended to the House with such further amendments as may have been adopted. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill as amended, and any further amendment thereto to final passage without intervening motion, except one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 hour.
Madam Speaker, for the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Hastings, pending which I yield myself as much time as I may consume. During consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for the purpose of debate only. Madam Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of this rule, a House resolution in front of you. House resolution provides a structured rule so that the House may consider H.R. 5, the Help Efficient, Accessible, Low-Cost, Timely Health Care Act of 2011. The rule provides for 6 hours of debate on this vital issue. 6 hours, Madam Speaker. In my opinion, the Health Act is one of the most imperative pieces of legislation to come to the House, to the floor of the House in the 112th Congress thus far. The bill repeals a particularly egregious part of government takeover of health care, the Independent Payment Advisory Board, or IPAB. In case you're unaware, IPAB is the 15-member panel created by Obamacare to rein in Medicare costs. IPAB they're unelected bureaucrats, 15 of them. The majority are not doctors, and their decisions will have the force of law and will go into effect automatically without the consent of Congress. But we'll get back to IPAB in a moment. H.R. 5 also implements long-needed medical malpractice tort reform. I hear all the time that we need to bring down the cost of health care. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle claim that government takeover of health care would do just that, reduce the cost of health care. In fact, President Obama claimed it would lower premiums by $2,500 per family per year. We know that's just not the case. Since Inauguration Day in 2009, premiums have risen by $2,213, almost the same amount the President promised he was going to save us. The annual Kaiser Foundation survey of employer-provided insurance found the average family premiums totaled $12,860 in 2008 and are now $15,073 in 2011. Moreover, CBO, Congressional Budget Office, projects the law's new benefit mandates will force premiums to rise on top of that $15,000 by $2,100 per year per family. Malpractice reform, on the other hand, will most definitely reduce the cost of health care. We've seen what defensive medicine is: CAT scans ordered, antibiotics prescribed, blood tests conducted not because the doctor thought they were necessary, but because he or she was scared of if they didn't order them that they would be sued for not prescribing them. The Department of Health and Human Services study said that defensive medicine cost $70 to $126 billion a year. That's billion. The CBO estimates there's a little more moderate stance, putting the number around $54 billion. Let me tell you, $54 billion, $70 billion, $126 billion, that's a lot of money in anybody's terms. And I've heard from a lot of folks that are opposing the legislation because it defies states' rights. I have to say I'm particularly surprised to hear so many of my colleagues on the other side making this argument. But I'm happy to see they've come to recognize the importance of state rights and the state sovereignty. I hope that means that we can count on them for their support and efforts moving forward to take federal power away from Washington, D.C., and return that power back to the states where it belongs, where our founding fathers envisioned that to be. I want to take a moment to make it clear to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle why this bill, H.R. 5, does not, I repeat, does not trample on the rights of our states. In the modern era, Congress has enacted many federal tort reform statutes to supersede contrary state laws, including recent federal tort reform protecting a vital domestic firearms industry. And judicial precedents have let little doubt about its constitutionality. Even President Reagan, who was unabashed champion for the states, established a special task force to study the need for tort reform that concluded that the federal government should address tort reform across the board. I fear that folks are claiming the 10th Amendment that states' rights aren't looking at the entirety of H.R. 5. They aren't looking at all the provisions that make it clear that the caps created in this bill only apply to states that don't already have their own caps. These provisions, flexi-cap, they're called, recognize that any state amount on caps takes precedent to this piece of legislation. That means if a state has a $1 billion cap, good for them. Let them keep it. It also means that if a state has a $100,000 cap, they can keep it too. And if a state decides to pass a law and establish a cap on their own to change their existing cap, they should go ahead and do it, because H.R. 5 isn't going to do anything to stop them from doing that. H.R. 5 clearly ensures that the state's right to set their caps where they want them and when they want them. I understand that trial lawyers won't like the federal limit, and luckily, I really worry about the American people as a whole, not just what trial lawyers have to say. Now, I know this may be speculation, but I think that special interest groups and perhaps some of the new converts to the 10th Amendment are hiding behind the states' rights argument because, in fact, they just don't want to see their own profits go down. But I fear that the state rights discussion is a red herring that only gets us off the most important issue, the issue that I started off with, the Independent Payment Advisory Board. Plain and simple, IPAB is going to cut health care that our nation's seniors can receive. Medicare Rationing Board, which is what this is, will decide the value of medical services, impose price controls that will slash senior access to doctors and other health care providers. We see this happening already. The Center for Medicare and Medicaid Savings actually confirmed that large reductions in Medicare payment rates to physicians would likely have serious implications for beneficiary access to care, utilization, intensity, and the quality of that care. And as Donald Berwick, President Obama's appointee as the Medicare administrator, said, the decision is not whether or not we will ration care. The decision is whether we will ration with our eyes open. H.R. 5 takes that choice away from the Administrator Berwick, from IPAB, from President Obama. H.R. sets forth a new way forward. H.R. 5 sets forth a new way forward. a way that says we don't need Washington bureaucrats who haven't even practiced medicine telling us what's best for us. We need to sit down with our doctors and come up with individual treatment plans, a way that actually does something about health care costs by removing frivolous lawsuits from the equation, a way forward that means state rights are still protected while also protecting seniors' rights to the best health care options available. With that, Madam Speaker, why I support this rule and why I support the underlying legislation, and it's why I encourage all my colleagues to do the same. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Florida reserves the balance of his time. For what purposes, the gentleman from Florida?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
And the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in opposition to H.R. 5.